Hi, welcome to Yoga Selection. My name is Rod. Today's class we're working with a sequence of poses that will help to ease sciatic pain. Make sure that you've got a chair, make sure that you've got a bolster, 3 blankets and a belt. And we'll begin with our chair and our bolster. And a version of the pose Pavanmuktasana, one that will just be a good starting point for working into that lower lumbar area, and one that will help to just soften and release that part of the lower back. So we've placed our bolster here leaning against the back frame of the chair. We're then sitting, straddling the chair, sitting in the chair back to front, and the bolster here will be a support for us to lean forwards onto. We'll be able to have the head either chin into the bolster. When we get there, we'll be able to have our arms folded, just loosely folded, and resting up onto the top of the bolster. Rather than just going directly forwards, let's just use the frame of the chair. So place the hands there and use the frame of the chair to lift the whole of the lumbar spine up. So the front, the back, both sides, lifting the chest as well, and then laying the chest forwards and over the bolster. From there, as I mentioned, the head can either come to the side or rest with the chin and the forehead directly down. I'll give you a moment just to settle there. And the bolster there, ideally, not just something that we lean forwards and into, but something that maintains a very gentle lift there at the front of the torso. Just to ensure that that is the case. We won't stay in the pose, but just using minimal effort, just slide, lift a little the skin there at the front of the torso up the bolster. And then as you rest forwards, just feel the friction, the grip of the skin on the bolster there, just maintaining that very gentle lift so that we're avoiding that tendency for the weight of the upper body to compress down and squash the lower back. From there we can just let everything release and relax. I'm keeping my head a little off my arms, more just so that I can still easily speak into the microphone. For you though, you've got your forehead or your cheek or your temple resting down easily, firmly into the end of the bolster. Smooth inhalation and exhalation. Make sure that you're not pushing that region where the spine joins in the pelvis forwards. Particularly for some people with some sciatic pain, that can be a bit of an instinct, just an ongoing tightness or hardness in the body. Just make sure that area can soften, so where the spine meets the pelvis, just letting go, releasing, so that you're not tipping forwards towards the front of the sitting bones, not slouching back towards the back of the sitting bones, but just staying more balanced there, somewhere in the center of the sitting bones. So a nice pose to come to, even at times when your back is a little more acutely sore or irritated. And sometimes a pose that we can just go to and ease off any major discomfort in the lower back. Good one also just to assess for today whether your back is ready to progress with some of the poses that we'll work with as the sequence develops. So let's transition now. We'll come up, put the bolster and the chair off to the side. Let's take one of the blankets. Have your blanket as a starting point. We're going to Ardha Mukha Virasana here, but let's have the blanket as a starting point, as you would use it for your Sabangasana in this fold configuration. Now, certain yoga blankets have different thicknesses, some thinner, some thicker. This one that I've got here today is reasonably thin, and I'm rolling it, quite a tight sausage roll from the long end towards the other long end. Probably about half of that roll is going to work well for me as I pull it firmly into the thigh creases here. So you may need to roll your blanket a little more, a little less. You can come forwards in a moment and then assess that. It's important that the blanket is not uncomfortably pushing up into the abdominal diaphragm area. More important that the blanket is actually keeping the thigh bones anchored down. So big toes together, knees apart as we would normally have. We've drawn that blanket firmly back into the thigh creases. We can even manually lift the abdominal flesh out and over that rolled blanket as we then come forwards and into the pose. Now you'll pick up reasonably quickly there if the roll in the blanket is too much. Feel free if you need to just to come up and either add more or less of a width to that blanket that you have wedged there between the legs and the torso. As I mentioned, the importance of that blanket, that it can clearly press the root of the thigh bones down, the root of the thigh bones being that area near the pelvis, where the thigh bones join into the pelvis, allowing them to press down. Feel it when you inhale, inhaling, not a deep breath, just a normal breath, but as you do the blanket quite clearly, keeping the thigh bones anchored back and into the body. The arms here are active, so we're intentionally choosing a version of this pose where the arms are active, the hands pressing down and the elbows straight. It means that you can keep your hips anchored, and that improves the release there through the lower back area. Bring your attention there to the back of the pelvis, the bone, the muscle, the skin there. Draw it back and down towards the toes. Imagine someone behind you with their hands quite firmly pressing back and down on that region of the body. As a consequence of that, we get an improved length through the lumbar area. So the lumbar area is in between the navel and the pelvis. So improved length there, but just as important, broadness across the lower back. Feel how from the spine in the center there's a nice spreading, and the muscle in the skin in an outward direction. It's a very comfortable aspect for the spine. Smooth inhalation, smooth exhalation. Okay, and then release and come up. We'll get to a version of uttanasana that will be more agreeable to people who are more flexible and whose backs are feeling fairly free of discomfort. But before we get there, let's do a version that will be a good starting point for everyone, knowing that some people might have a sore back and intentionally working with this class for that reason. So a half uttanasana to begin with. Have the hands quite high. Let's have our hands at shoulder height as we normally do, fingers spreading, wrists shoulder width. And then stepping the feet back. A moment just to settle into the pose. So importantly, we've got the hands high so that any stiffness in the hamstring area isn't causing rounding in the upper back, shortening through the front of the spine. So there's a nice even length through all sides of the lumbar spine, being the front, the back, the right and the left side. And we're not overworking, it's not a particularly hard muscular pose here, but the work that we are engaging with, the hands press into the wall and the elbows lift. And we're keeping our chest and our back ribs in the direction of the floor. And keeping the elbows lifting. We're moving the pelvis back. Find the front of the pelvis first of all, where the pubic bone is. Then the back of the pelvis. And where the legs join into the pelvis. The top of the thigh bones there, press back. Again, imagine that someone's behind you with their hands holding your pelvis reasonably firmly, pulling the pelvis back, and that's how we get that extra bit of traction through the lower back. Okay, so a version of uttanasana that will be approachable, agreeable for more or less everyone, depending on how your back is feeling. But this next one, let's step forwards, will be more suited to times when your back is feeling a little freer. We'll take our yoga chair and fold it up as we would normally stack it and put it away. If your chair, like mine, has got a cushion, have the cushion facing out away from the body. The distance of the feet of the chair away from the feet, it will vary according to your height. If you're taller, the chair is going to be closer to your feet. If you're shorter, it's going to be further away from the feet. If the top of the chair is painful, uncomfortable on the pubic bone area, of course you put a blanket, drape a blanket over there, just for simplicity, so that you can easily see the chair. I'm just going to keep the chair as it is. Probably most people would prefer to have a blanket there draped over the top of the chair, because we really want a lot of the body weight as we now come into the pose hanging off the chair. Once we're down into the pose, we then just need to assess if the chair is firmly enough wedged up into that pubic bone area. I can feel it's a little loose, so I'll just slide the feet of the chair a little closer into my feet. And we want to make sure that the top of the chair is not pressing too much into the bladder region, but more to the front of the pelvis. And we really want that sense of being able to hang off the chair, and it will, the more we do that, get that nice sense of traction, of extra space coming through that lumbar area. Now we will eventually completely relax here, but let's just bring the forearms onto the chair. We'll press the forearms into the chair and use that as leverage to lift the chest, the abdominal area, the lower abdominal area further out and over the chair. And then we can just completely relax. You can have your arms there folded. For me, my chest quite naturally reaches to the seat of the chair. You might find that it's a little off the chair, but the basic principle here is that we're able just to let go and relax. If the chair was to suddenly dislodge, you would fall forwards here. So important that the legs of the chair are securely on your yoga mat, gripping it, so that that isn't the case. As you inhale, that hanging action that we're working with here, it enables the front ribs to release further down the chair, out and down. As we exhale, we're doing that without the front ribs retracting, shrinking back up towards the pelvis. And a pose that you could come back to another time and just remain in, stay in. It's actually quite a nice way of doing uttanasana after a sequence of back bends as well, but also really good for releasing the back during sciatic discomfort. Okay, and then release and come up. Uttanasana. Just put the chair off to the side. Important that we've got a wall here to work with. Make sure that your mat is securely up against the wall. We're standing with the feet together, the ankle bones roughly a thigh bone's length away from the wall, and we'll, for today, have the hands beside the hips. This gives you a little bit more control in the pose, both coming down into it, but also, importantly, as we'll look in a moment, coming up and out of it. So we'll bend the knees, hips a little higher than the knees, and then the hands can come to the thighs. The feet press down, and as they do, we gain the ability to press the back of the pelvis into the wall, and choose the point there where the spine and the pelvis join to press into the wall. And this next stage is an important one. Bring your hands back to the wall there, either side of the hips, and keep the back of your pelvis pressing into the wall as you slide up the wall. And you feel as you do that, there's that nice sense of traction up through the lower back. So this time, same pose, same basic shape. It will look the same from the outside, but from the inside you'll feel that action of the feet pressing down. It enables you to push back into the wall, but we also want to press into the floor in order to grip the wall with the lower back and lift the spine up, so that we're getting that traction, the lumbar spine getting pulled up and out of the pelvis. Let's try it. So bend the knees, we've got the shoulders back to the wall, feet pressing down, pressing the back of the pelvis into the wall, but the feet pressing down, the back of the pelvis grips the wall, and we're lifting the spine up. Your hands can help with that. They press down into the thighs and lifting the lumbar spine, the front, the back, the right and the left side. Okay, and then hands back to the wall and continue to come all the way up. Let's come down now to the floor. Pavan Muktasana. And work today with the feet to the wall. We will be transitioning to Supta Padangustasana. We'll need a belt when we get there. Maybe we'll have the belt ready for that reason, and we'll clear some space. I'm just going to, before I get too far ahead of myself, I'll just move this chair a little bit out of the way so that I have room for the second variation of Supta Padangusthasana, where we bring the leg out to the side. Before we get there, Pavanmuktasana, the left leg straight, the right knee bent up to the chest. And I'll give you a moment just to find that position. Your fingers are interlocked around the head of the right shin bone. Elbows are bent. There's quite a firm pressure there with the hands onto the shin, and the hands resist this next movement. But the shin, rather than just being passive and limp there, the shin presses back against the hands as if trying to pull the hands towards the wall. So resist with the hands, but press, pull with the head of the shin bone there as if you're aiming to drag the hands towards the wall. Notice how that gives you the ability to move the right outer hip nearer to the wall. The right outer hip, the right sitting bone as well, move towards the wall. Now done correctly, you're going to get very similar to the previous pose, that sense of length, of improved space through the lower back. Make sure that the right foot is not crossing over to the left side. So keep the big toe base and inner heel on the center line of the pose. Try it on the left side. Bring the right foot to the wall, left knee to the chest, hugging the knee into the chest whilst making that action that we've just worked with, resisting with the hands, but with the left shin as if pulling the hands towards the wall. Feel it gives you the ability to move the whole left side of the pelvis closer to the wall, not to the point where the body distorts, but just to the point where the hips are level. You probably would have found very natural, very normal for this to occur, that as soon as the left knee bent up to the chest, it actually then distorted the hips, pushing the left hip closer up towards the torso. And then we'll bring both of the knees to the chest, fingers interlocked around the heads of the shin bone. And again, now with both shins, we're drawing the hands towards the wall. We resist with the hands, so someone from the outside does not see the hands move. It's an action that you feel from the inside, resisting with the hands, but pressing with the shins. When you do that, you get the ability to press that area of the spine where it joins the pelvis down and into the floor. Once you've got that contact, then emphasize that contact by lifting your head up, using abdominal strength to do it. The head lifts up, but that region of the spine, it presses down. Still with the shins resisting against the hands. Don't confuse that though with squeezing the knees together. If we do that, the buttocks start to contract and then we start to tighten through the lower back. So resist with the hands, but press with the shins, but do that in a way that presses the back waist down. It has a nice broadening effect on the waist. It releases from the center and out to the sides. Okay, and then bring your head back down. We'll bring the left foot to the wall and we'll come to Supta Padangusthasana. Now another time we could come back to the pose and emphasize its ability to lengthen the hamstrings, and a great pose for being able to do that. And today, with all of these poses, we're really looking to target the area between the navel and the pelvis, knowing that a lot of the sciatic difficulty comes in that L4, L5 area and where the spine literally joins into the pelvis region. So we've got the foot pressing up into the belt. Make sure that the big toe base is active, the right big toe base as if pushing something heavy upwards towards the ceiling, and the left thigh pressing firmly down to the floor. And use the resistance of the belt there. Press into it, and as we've just done, move the right outer hip towards the wall, the right sitting bone towards the wall, the back of the right hip towards the wall, the left thigh press down, and contain the right hip socket towards the left hip socket, but keep the left thigh pressing down. and then we'll release and we'll go to the left side. Placing the belt just under the ball of the left foot, raise the left leg up. For today, not being as concerned with holding the hands close to the foot, and some of you might be able to easily hold the big toe. Using the belt today and keeping the backs of the shoulders nice and close to the floor, even pressing literally down into the floor. Right thigh press down, left foot press up into the belt. Use that as resistance to now move the left outer hip towards the wall, the left sitting bone towards the wall, back of the left hip towards the wall, the left hip socket, contain it, draw it in towards the center, towards the right hip socket, but press the right thigh down, press the right foot into the wall, and then release. We'll come back to the first side. If you've lost your firm contact with the feet to the wall, just wriggle in a little closer. Right foot up, belt in the right hand. We're bringing the leg out to the side. First of all, though, bring your left arm out to the side. And we'll go today palm facing up. We can work either way there, but today palm facing up. Make sure that the left wrist is not face height, but shoulder height. Often we instinctively align the hand with the face. Make sure that the arm is at a right angle to the spine. And then bringing the leg down and out to the side. As I've done today, you've got the right elbow in contact with the floor, and working more actively, we could have the right arm straight. More classically, we would have the arm straight, but gives us a little more pivot with our balance, having the right elbow to the floor, so we're less inclined to tip to the right. So left thigh press down, left foot press to the wall, the right outer thigh crease towards the wall, the right buttock towards the left buttock, the left side of the sacrum down, the left thigh press down, and then release and come up, and we'll change. Belt in the left hand, right arm out to the side. Just make sure you've got enough room out to the side. I'll just have enough, I think, with the wall being there nearby me to the left, but we'll see. Bring the leg out to the side. Right thigh press down, right foot press to the wall. The left outer thigh crease towards the wall. It's quite a strong adjustment to the overall pose. Someone from the outside would see you make that adjustment. Left outer thigh crease, firm adjustment towards the wall. We really need to challenge the foot with the belt, otherwise the foot tends to pull the belt in the direction of the wall. The left buttock towards the right buttock. The left hip socket towards the right hip socket. But the right thigh bone press down and the right foot press firmly into the wall. And then raise the leg up, and you might need to look to the screen as I describe this next set of movements. Have your left knee bent and your left foot flat to the floor. And we're going to cross the legs. The right leg will just cross over the left leg. It's quite a casual, comfortable position. Some people just instinctively do it outside of yoga practice just for the level of comfort that is inherent there. But let's align now the ankle, the right outer ankle, with the midline of the left thigh. Have it down a little bit from the knee, so it's in that last bit of the fleshy quadriceps area before the knee joint. And if we lift our head and look at the legs, we see that triangle that the right leg has formed with the left leg, and then our right arm comes through that triangle as we, with both hands, interlock our fingers around the head of the left shin. We'll keep the right toes hooked back, retracted back towards the shin bone, and the right elbow bends a little, it makes contact with that right leg and just pushes it gently away from the torso. As with our arm strength, we draw the right ankle in closer to the face. The right outer thigh crease towards the wall, the right sitting bone towards the wall, the back of the pelvis pressing firmly down and into the floor. Okay, and then release, and we'll change sides. The left ankle crossed over the right thigh near the knee. Make sure that the ankle's right on the midline of the right thigh, close to the knee joint. And then interlocking the fingers around the head of the right shin. You do need to use some abdominal strength here. We're lifting the head off the floor. You're looking with your face towards the left inner ankle, bending the elbows. As the elbows bend, the left elbow presses out into the left leg. As the ankle moves closer to the face, move the left side of the pelvis nearer to the wall. And then release downwards, develop that movement. Bringing the chair onto the mat. Make sure that the chair is near to the wall. It's this distance, it's roughly, say, the third of a yoga mat. The front feet of the chair away from the wall. It might need to come closer, it might need to come a little further depending on your body size and flexibility range. Let's start, maybe just we'll describe, we've just worked with the outer ankle here. This time we're going to have the region halfway between the outer ankle and the outer heel. So I'll put my finger there, it's that, to be quite specific, that region of the foot. That region of the foot we're going to align with the midline of the left thigh as we cross the legs up. As I look down there, the right shin is more or less parallel with the wall. The right knee comes out to the side. We can turn the flesh of the right thigh, the inner thigh up, the outer thigh down. It just gets that turning action in the hip, reduces the twisting action in the knee. The other thing that helps here, if we, as we did on that previous version of the pose, if we pull the toes back towards the shin again, it just insists that the knee does less twisting, more opening there for the hip. And of course we want to get into that glute area here and allow that to release. Before we go forwards, we'll be bringing our hands to the wall shortly. Just bring your hands down onto the seat of the chair and make sure that the back of the right hip is being contained. It tends to drag back and drop down. Move it in, feel how the spine lifts up. Continue that lift, particularly the front of the lumbar spine, as you then reach forwards and place your hands onto the wall there in front. So as you come forwards there, you've lengthened from the pubic bone to the navel. You're containing the back of the right hip. It feels a little bit as if you're dragging the seat of the chair towards the wall with your sitting bone. Make sure though that the knee remains relaxed. The right back waist area, it's broadening away from the spine. The chest lifting forwards and towards the wall. Ideally, the emphasis of the pose, the region that's being targeted by the pose, that right gluteal region. Okay, and then walk the hands back down. We'll change sides, bringing the left foot up onto the right thigh. And as we did there on the first side, we'll just manually turn the thigh flesh, inner thigh up, outer thigh down. To further reduce the twisting in the knee, we can, with our thumbs, rotate the calf muscle in a forward direction towards the wall, keeping the toes hooked back. And then coming forwards, making sure that the back of the left hip is contained. Imagine someone behind you there with their hand, just pressing the back of the left hip in the direction of the wall. Pubic bone to navel, lengthening forwards. Release, softening in that left back waist area. Don't confuse that with collapsing the spine and the chest. Keep the chest actively moving towards the wall. Okay, and then release. and come up. We'll turn the chair around. Chair malasana. Sitting far back into the chair. So if your hips are capable of sitting a little bit back in between the frame of the yoga chair, then do so. Have your feet a fraction wider than the front legs of the chair. More specific, make sure that your inner knees are wide enough apart so that your arms and shoulders can fit down in between them. The sitting bones, just start your awareness of the pose with them anchored to the floor without too much tipping towards the front of the pelvis, so keeping the back of the sitting bones anchored down. We'll reach forwards and place the fingertips initially just gently to the floor. At this point, knowing that some people will be working with some stiffness, some soreness, inflammation perhaps in that lower lumbar area, just make sure that your back is agreeable to this. If not, then it might be that you just need to sit upright and just take your time with that movement. Just so that we can get through the different stages, I'll a little more quickly come into the fuller extension, but I'm aware that some of you might just be taking that at your own pace. We started with the fingertips to the floor. Let's see if we can then just get the whole palm down to the floor. Again, without leaning too much towards the feet. With your hands press into the floor so that the sitting bones can stay anchored back and into the seat of the chair. Let your neck relax now, let your head hang. See if you can just fold your arms and feet stay active, the heels pressing down. I can feel my knees squeezing against the torso and sitting bones making firm contact with the seat of the chair. So each of these stages, feel free to consolidate. If you want to go that bit further, now reaching through the front legs of the chair, you can hold the back legs. Some of you will have a crossbar. I've got one there. It works well. I'm gripping that. If you haven't got it, just use the back legs of the chair, hold them firmly. And now we're more actively lifting the head and looking forwards. At this point, we can really get a very clear and comfortable traction through the lower back. A really good pose for getting that traction. Make sure you're getting the traction at the front of the lumbar spine, not just the back of the lumbar spine. So between pubic bone and navel, lengthening forwards. Now let's not suddenly release from the pose. We'll just undo how we went in. We'll bring the hands first back to the floor, then the fingertips, and then maintaining length in the spine, supporting with your arms as you come back to sitting upright. We'll then come up, we'll put the chair off to the side. We'll use it again shortly, so not too far away, but out of the way for now. We'll have a bolster here, and we're going to be with our legs up the wall, a little bit like virasana, but no height under the hips. Our hips will be to the floor, and we're going to be placing our bolster on the soles of the feet. If you have someone around you, then great, they can assist you with that and help you to get that bolster positioned on your feet. Otherwise, it is possible to do it yourself, and we'll look at that. Let's have a blanket for the head. I've got a half fold blanket. These blankets are quite thin. That will be an okay height for my head. Don't go too high. It's more for cushioning than for lifting the head. And to get into the pose, probably better here than forward rolling. You could forward roll, but today coming from a fetal position, making sure that the shoulders come to the floor, and then the legs swivel up the wall. Make sure you can reach your head blanket and pull it in. And if you've got that person nearby willing to help you with your bolster, then make use of it. Otherwise, we'll need to do a bit of a balancing act. We'll bend our knees down. We'll place the bolster, balance it on the feet. You've got to make sure that the bolster is balanced on the feet as you then straighten your legs. And particularly those of you that have, as I've just done, balance the bolster yourself, and I'll give you a moment just to fine tune. But I can feel actually the weight of the bolster is a little more towards the ball of the foot. It would be better if it was more evenly distributed between the ball of the foot and the heel. Now what I've done there, just to help with that is to just inch my heels just a fraction away from the wall. Now, in a yoga studio situation, you would be maybe with some sandbags on the feet, some weights, heavier weights on the feet, and you would be, if you were really lucky, strapped, your legs would be strapped to a column in the room, and then you wouldn't be needing to, as you are probably feeling now, that muscular need to keep the knees straight. So we're not as interested here in what the legs are doing. We won't be holding too long because the quadriceps are needing to maintain the pose. As I mentioned, ideally the legs would be just strapped to a column and then they could just let go. So that the intention here, not so much to feel the weight of the bolster with the feet and the legs, it's more that we're just allowing the weight of the bolster to, in an uninterrupted way, pass through the legs and press down into the back of the pelvis. So if someone was to come and take that bolster away, the back of the pelvis would feel lighter. If someone was to add an extra bolster onto the one that we currently have there, we'd feel that the back of the pelvis would notice the extra weight. That's the effect that we're looking for here. The back of the pelvis being encouraged to release down and into the floor, spread out as it does so, release as it does so in an outward direction. Make sure the area that we've been looking at throughout the class, where the spine and the pelvis joint, releasing, descending down and into the floor. If you've got tighter hamstrings, you might be finding that this is already starting to feel a little fatiguing. And ideally it won't be. Ideally it will just be a pose that you can hold there, stay in long enough for the effect of gravity to have its impact there on the lumbar spine area. Knowing that for some people it's probably not going to be the most comfortable, natural position. We won't be holding too long here today. Well, let's start to release out of it now. We'll just bend the knees, taking care with the bolster. We can then just, with our hands, move the bolster. We'll roll to the side and come up. We'll finish with a couple of versions of shavasana, both of them nice and therapeutic for your lower back. The first one, a prone shavasana, where we lie on our front, and let's carefully position our blankets. So we've got 3 blankets, and put them up towards the far end of the mat. To all the people, you're making sure you've left enough room behind you for your legs to fit. You'll see why in a moment. We need to, so we're using the blankets similar to how we would use them in shoulder stand. And probably many of you use 3 blankets in your shoulder stand. And we're used to aligning the neat folded edge where our shoulders go. Here we're more interested in this edge here. If you look to the screen, this edge here, where the front of the pelvis will be. I'll explain that a little more shortly, but we've stacked the blankets and we've made as neat a vertical edge there as possible with the blankets. Now I've chosen 3 blankets knowing that my blankets, as I mentioned a couple of times, are quite thin. If you've got thick blankets, you might find that you only need 2, perhaps even 1. So you will get the opportunity to tailor that and make sure that you're comfortable in it. I'll stand up just to explain a little more clearly what's happening here. So commonly when we stand, the back of the pelvis jams up, the weight of the spine pushes down, and we get this compression into the lower back. Something that can often help there, if we just a little bit tilt the pelvis. We don't want to eliminate the lumbar curve. We don't want it to be too straight. Equally, we don't want it to over push forwards uncomfortably so. So with this particular blanket configuration, we're looking to align this edge here just a little bit up from the iliac crest. And you can feel that with your thumbs if you just press into the hips of those bones that jut out there at the front, a little bit to the side of the pelvis. We want the edge of the blankets coming a fraction higher than that. So if I trace across, it's just a little bit down from where the navel area is. You might need to come on a little bit more, off a little bit more, and let your back tell you when there's that nice release that comes when you're in that exact sweet spot. I'm just going to move the blankets a little further out. And we're lying on our front. Now I've got a microphone here on my chest, so I won't be perhaps fully letting go into this pose, you will be. You just have your, as I've got now, arms folded and letting your forehead rest down into your forearms. If it feels more comfortable for you, some people quite happily lie on their front with their head to the side. That's an option as well. But play with it, come onto the blanket a little more, off the blanket a little more. I need to come just a little more on. And then instantly I can feel it, the tailbone releasing down. And helpful here, someone with their hand, the heel of their hand on your sacrum, pressing it down, whilst pressing it down, drawing it away from the spine. And also important that the inner groins are not dropping here. So the inner groins, they turn up a little as we stay in the pose. Again, just for today's video, getting a taste of this pose, I'm not relaxing my head, I'm keeping my head up. You will be relaxing your head, but just giving you a taste of the pose so that you can, if it feels good for your back, and it will for some people, then you can always come back to it and use it as a back releasing, back cooling, soothing pose at times when there is some discomfort there. Okay, so one of the versions of shavasana that's come out of it, just a very short taste of it there today. And the really classical back releasing shavasana we'll finish with as our last pose, using the seat of the chair, the calves up onto the seat of the chair. Let's incorporate our bolster into the pose. It may not, when you see it, look so comfortable from the outside. It actually is comfortable when you're working in the pose. So I'll explain as we go. Make sure you've got the bolster within reach. Make sure that you've then placed your calves up onto the seat of the chair. You've adjusted your head blanket. Make sure that the back of your pelvis is in contact with the floor. Shorter stature people, you may need to put a support under the back of your pelvis if just the height of the chair is lifting the back of your pelvis off the floor. Then we're going to use the bolster on the abdominal area, not so much for affecting the abdominal area, but more so that we can get that sense of deepening release into the lower back. So we're going to place the bolster not on its flat side, but more like this. You might need to just turn your head to see. So tip the bolster, it's really leaning against the thighs, but the weight of the bolster a little more targeted into that area, really near to the front of the pelvis. So it's a similar region of the body where the top of the chair was earlier in uttanasana. And again, it's not that we're, and it might be initially, but let's look at it. Initially the weight of the bolster experienced more on the abdominal area. As we just stay and settle and get more acclimatized to the pose, we feel the weight of the bolster more on the back of the pelvis, and that's the intention there. The bolster helping the back of the pelvis to spread out, release and relax down and into the floor. Feel it as you exhale, the bolster descending, but more clearly exhaling and the back of the pelvis descending, relaxing down into the floor. Also with the inhalation, it's not the sort of inhalation in Shavasana where we push the abdomen up into the bolster. As you inhale, let the bolster continue to gravitate towards the floor. As you inhale, feel the weight of the bolster, its effect on the back of the pelvis. That whole back waist area, just allowing it to soften and dilate, to spread out in all directions. Another few moments there. Okay, let's prepare to come out of the pose. We'll do it first of all by manually moving that bolster, putting it off to the side. We can then bring the knees into the chest. If your back's still feeling a bit tight, you can even hug your knees gently in towards your chest. and then eyes open, and from there roll to the side and come up as you're ready. Thank you for practicing with Yoga Selection.